We are adjourning the closed session with no reportable action. And I'm going to open the special meeting of Tuesday, May 16th. And we're moving to item 1A, adjustments to the cost of services schedule, user fees.
Hello. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. My name is Dennis Jaw, Senior Accountant here for this great city of Half Moon Bay, and it is a pleasure for me to be here to present to you the results of this user fee study. And so today we're going to, I'll go over the agenda a little bit. We're going to talk about the background of the user fee study itself, how we got to this point. We're going to talk about the project scope, methodology, and results. With that, our consultants here who will be able to describe that to you. We'll talk about some policy options and staff recommendations that we'll be making for you tonight. And we'll briefly discuss park and recreation fees, which is not within the scope of this study due to timing. Due to the timing of the Parks and Rec Department, but we'll talk about the fees that we're going to be bringing forward and what we'll be doing about that in the near and short term. So to move on to the next slide, just a little background on it. So the best practices for municipals organization states that we should, on a regular basis, review the cost to the city to provide fee-related services. And what that does is that attempts to incorporate every single cost involved with providing the services, and that gives us a maximum amount that we're allowed to charge for the services under government code. And so to do that, we usually also incorporate, and which we have done, a cost allocation model or plan so that we can fully capture all the fees and all of the different costs associated with the various departments that support the departments that actually directly offer the fee-related services. The last fee study performed in the city of Half Moon Bay was 12 years ago in 2003, 2004. So as we all know, the city is much different now than it was back then. So we do see that the fees that we discovered are reflected in the different organizational structure and the city demographics and dynamics that we see now relative to 12 years ago. So a brief timeline is that on August 19, 2014 was when this process started. We awarded the contract to NBS Government Financial Group, and that's the cost allocation plan portion was completed back in 2015, and we also incorporated a development impact fee study with this process, and that was presented to council on November 17th, 2015, and those fees were adopted and went into effect in January of 2016. So here we are in the final stage of this entire process. We're looking at cost-based user fee related studies, and with that, I'd like to introduce Nicole Kassam. She's with NBS Government Financial Group, and she will be talking about the study itself.
So, good late afternoon, Mayor and City Council. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Nicole Kassam from NBS, and I've been the primary consultant on this project from start to finish. So I feel very fortunate to be here today and present the results of our analysis to you. So a user fee study, you may or may not be familiar, it basically aims to define what the full cost of providing various services that the city provides for which a fee can be charged. And under the law, the only limitation for charging those fees is that they cannot exceed the estimated and reasonable cost of providing the service. So what's very important about the work that we do is that we use a defensible methodology that's been around in the state of California since probably the 70s or so, and it goes through a data collection and analysis exercise to establish the full cost of providing services. And so what we're doing here tonight is really looking at the council's policy on cost recovery and where those fees should be set according to the council's direction. So user fees, they are cost recovery opportunities for certain types of services. These are fees that the council sets. We can recommend what the fee should be till we're blue in the face, but the council ultimately makes that decision. It doesn't require a vote. And I think Dennis alluded to that at the beginning. These are not impact fees. Those have already been decided upon and enacted, and they're also not taxes, fines, or utility rates. These are really user and or regulatory fees, very specific type of fee. Yes?
Just at the start, you mentioned that are the fees based on the full recovery of what it costs?
Yes, I'll get to that in just a second.
Oh, you're going to talk more to
Yep.
that? So all right, I'll let.
Are you sure?
What if something exceeds the cost, but the council elects more or less that it's okay to have the what we take in and how much it costs not be aligned?
In our opinion, if there's a fee that exceeds the cost of providing service, according to our study, then the council would need to bring that down to equal no more than 100% of the cost calculation in the study. Right, so what you'll see in the results is that some fees need to go up, some need to come down, some stay about the same. So we'll definitely get to that, and I will describe kind of what types of costs are included in each calculation. Okay.
Oh, so just maybe the short answer is the study will tell us what maximum we can charge. The council can elect to charge less, can't charge more.
Yep. All right. So I think I would skip ahead to just which departments we studied or which departments have fees. So that's on the project scope slide where it says departments included. Okay, slide 9. So we looked at some fees, some administrative fees. We looked at planning, building, and land development engineering. We looked at police, and we also helped establish a technology fee, which is a common type of fee seen in most California agencies. So I talked about this kind of being a data collection and analysis exercise. So the main data components of any study are going to be an adopted budget document. So in this case, we used fiscal year 16-17 staffing information and budgetary information. We also looked at workload. So workload for the last complete fiscal year, that helps us inform the fee models and make sure that they're a self-auditing type of scenario that we're building, so we're not structuring to fund a bunch of resources that we don't have, or we're not underfunding what we've adopted. We collect time data, time estimate information for each fee-related service, and that's based on the professionals who provide the work for the city of Half Moon Bay. And we also collect data related to what is the city currently charging, current fees, and what would staff recommend be charged at the end of the process. Oops. So the methodology is pretty simple. There's a lot of conversation and data collection and accountability involved in collecting the information, but the methodology is basically a time estimate for each service for which a fee is to be charged, multiplied by a fully burdened hourly rate. So we place a value on an increment of time, we multiply that by a time estimate. So to your question about what is a fully burdened hourly rate, that is the full cost of providing service for each hour of time, and it's going to include direct costs, such as the ones in the budget, salaries, benefits, operating services and supplies. It's going to include indirect costs, and those indirect costs become a conversation about even within an operational unit like the building department, there are certain activities provided that are managerial or supervisory in nature, or certain types of costs that are indirect versus direct. And then we also have agency-wide or city-wide overhead costs, which would be a portion of costs allocated for services that support those departments that charge fees, such as human resources or finance. And we have what's called a cost allocation plan, which is an industry standard methodology for allocating those costs to each department in the city and or fund. Okay? And then sometimes fees have pass-through type costs, such as the direct cost of a sign that needs to be charged separately, or a contractor and so forth. So what slide is this one? 13? Okay. Oh, they're not? Okay, so you'll see a summary results table. So this is the results by department and in aggregate for the study. So you can see the current cost recovery percentage on this slide for every department that we studied, and there's definitely a range there. And then you can see the overall cost recovery performance for these services for the city as a whole on the total row. So right now, the city's collecting about 56% of the total costs of providing services. And with the initially recommended fees that Dennis will talk about in just a second, looks like recommending moving to 99%. So just some nuances by department. A lot of the administrative fees were deleted if the information is now available online. We're seeing that in a lot of agencies where reports and information are no longer requiring subscription or copy fees. They're just right up there online. There are fees in administrative departments that are limited by the state, such as copies for the California Public Records Act and also return check fees. In planning and public works, these are probably the two departments where we did the most restructuring out of any department in the study. Planning went more towards a deposit and time and materials approach, where they collect an initial amount and then they track and bill against that, and they request additional funds if it goes over, or they refund if they don't use all their funds. Public Works completely restructured how they just brought their entire fee structure up to more of an industry standard approach. It just hadn't been looked at in a lot of years, and since then the industry has gone through some tiering and some things that make fees more fair and equitable as projects get larger. Building, not a lot of change there. We just recalibrated fee amounts to equal their costs. And in police, also not many changes. A lot of police fees are limited by state statute, or just can't charge full cost recovery. With the technology fee, I'd just like to point out this is something new to the city. So this is a fee that is charged separately on top of development permits for purposes of maintaining and updating the permitting software technology that keeps all the records and issues all the permits. And the reason, it's an indirect cost, actually. It's a support-related cost, and it could just go into the whole fee amount, but the reason we're charging it separately is to be able to track and expend it separately, specifically for that purpose. So it's the only reason that we would call that out, in order to make sure we stay on top of having the right technology to support the permitting operation. So now we're really at the point in the study where we start to talk about individual fees and what the gap is between what we're charging now and what the maximum fee amount is. And we'd just like to point out that when we go into that conversation, that anytime a fee is adopted at less than 100%, it needs a different funding source, which is most often the general fund. So when the council elects to subsidize a service, then it just requires an alternate funding source. It can't be layered onto, this fee payer over here, and you can't really do that with setting fees. And the way that most municipalities make that decision is they decide which fees are more privately beneficial to the fee payer versus which are more fees that are charged, for services that enhance the public good. So recreation fees are a good example. Even though NBS didn't study them, it's a good example of where services are often subsidized. Okay? So we really hope to see that you guys take a look at these fees every 5 years. Approximately, it would be a good conversation to keep having on a routine basis, and especially if there's any reorganization going on or big changes in the economy and so forth, and that's a time to look at it sooner. And that's it. I'll turn it over to Dennis for the exciting stuff.
So looking at the next slide is just a summary of fee activity. This is just to show that we're not comprehensively increasing all fees. We did the fee study and some came back lower. And so out of the 294 fees that we now have on this fee schedule, a little over a third were reduced or stayed the same. Most of them did increase based on the current costs that we have now, but some of them did decrease or stay the same. So our recommendation, we did bring this study to the Finance Committee on, I believe, May 9th, a week ago. And it was recommended to us that because we used this fiscal year 16-17 budget and we're adopting these fees for the 17-18 fiscal year, that we would continue to stay on top of the costs by including a CPI increase along with the fees. So we So we incorporated that into our recommendation, and the fees that you will see in the next few slides, the totals don't match the totals that you saw on the earlier slide because those did not include the CPI upgrade. But we used the CPIW, W stands for wage earners, and the one in February 2017, which is the most recent that we had available at the time, was 3.3%. So we are recommending that all fees recover 100% of the costs, with a few notable exceptions that we'll talk about in the next couple of slides. And by doing so, we project that revenues will increase by approximately $436,000 above what we would normally have if no fee changes were made. So just to look briefly at the fees that we are recommending less than 100% recovery for and the reasons for doing that. The one administrative fee we'd like to see not at 100% is for block party and fundraising permits, just because we believe that supports the community, community growth, and we'd like to encourage that by subsidizing that with the general fund to some degree. For public safety fees, with public safety reports, even though the cost was calculated to be $21, we kept it at $10 based on discussions with the sheriff's office, just to keep it at a reasonable level and on par with neighboring cities. We have what's called a public dance security assessment, and what my understanding of that is that when you have a public gathering, you can request that the sheriff's office evaluate your needs of how much security you will need based on whether or not alcohol is involved and all those things. And my understanding also is that nonprofit organizations are required to get this permit, whereas for-profit organizations are not. So we also decided to keep that at a lower than 100% cost recovery because we want to encourage that they get the security assessment so that adequate security is available for those events. And for vehicle repossession release, we kept that at 60% of the cost because fees are required to remain at $15 as mandated by the state. And for a bit of discussion about the building and planning fees, I would like to bring John Dowdy to discuss those, as he's more familiar with the fees.
Here, wait, can you tell us on the admin fees, what fees are going up then? Can you, I see which ones are remaining, but what is the new fees for the different pieces of what people go for? Do you have that information?
I don't have it currently in front of me. I wasn't prepared to go each individual fee, but if you'd like, we can. Oh,
yeah. I mean, really, if you just pick out the top three of what people spend on that category, and then talk to me about what the increase is so we have a sense before it hits the public.
It's in the packet?
It's an attachment 5.
Excuse me, here we go.
You see it? It's in the packet. The other piece? No, it's in the digital packet.
Which attachment is that?
Attachment 5 of what?
Attachment 5 of the staff report for this is the new fee study, and attachment.
Is it 37? Is that right?
Is that the NBS report?
I believe it's attachment 2. That's the NBS report. And
Is this in the budget portion?
no,
City council report?
it should be the Fee Study Council staff report that we're looking at right now.
Attachment 2? Let's see what we got.
Are you trying to get them to look
It's
at this?
attachment five.
Attachment 5?
Attachment 5. Attachment 5 is the actual.
So attachment 5 is the actual master fee schedule, and I can tell you from the study which ones are likely increasing. So it's going to be the staff research rates, the special event permits, looks like the yearly parking permit processing for Half Moon Bay residents. And also, there was a new fee added for Business Improvement District Administration for city hotels. So administrative fees, those are the ones that are increasing.
I was caught up in that, sorry. From basically the development-related fees, we've recommended a few be considered at less than the 100% recovery. One of those, first on the list there, is the solar panels. There's two issues there. One is that we are mandated by state law to keep fees at certain levels. This meets that requirement. Beyond that, from a sustainability perspective, our take was that the community and the council were interested in embracing more sustainable efforts, and this was one minor way to assist in that. From the planning perspective, the council talked extensively at the retreat about affordable housing, one of those being accessory dwelling units. There was discussion at that time about reductions and of fees and such, and so this basically reflected sort of that response in terms of looking at accessory dwelling unit, the cost of applications being roughly at 50% of actual cost. The big issue here I think for policy issue is the appeal fee. We are recommending most notably that the appeal fee for those projects within the coastal zone, appeal zone, be a no-cost appeal. The reason behind this is that if we do not charge an appeal fee, those projects would automatically have to appeal locally to the city council or planning commission, as it may be, and are not allowed to just jump to the coastal commission for appeal. So this basically provides the opportunity for local decision-making to occur, problem solving to occur without having to bump this up to the coastal commission. The reason why this is coastal commission basically is not designed around the fee structure, and they say if this is discouraging appeals by charging a fee, then you can come directly to us. And we believe there are many good reasons to do this, and we've talked sort of across the aisle and across the board on this issue, and there seems to be consensus that this is the right thing to do, both from coastal commission staff and from local folks as well. And then, again, simple issues. We want to encourage people to ask questions and get answers. So the zoning compliance letter, there's no reason to charge full, we think, on that to encourage the right decisions. So down the road, we don't have problems with people who didn't ask because they were afraid of the dollar amount. So those are just kind of the reasons behind that.
John, can I interrupt a second? I'm very glad that you would like to eliminate the inside the coastal commission zone fee. I would also advocate that the other fee be eliminated also for pretty much the same reasons, to encourage more open ability of the citizens to not feel intimidated, that if they wanted to appeal planning commission decision, they could go right ahead and do that. So that's one change that I would advocate.
Purely a policy decision.
Wow. I need to understand that a little bit better. Which other fee specifically?
Yeah, if a decision of the planning commission is made that's not within the coastal zone appeal, it would normally go straight to us, and there would be a fee. It's not a lot because they are reducing it, but I would like to make it 0 so that citizens feel that if they had a case that they'd like to appeal to the city council, they would not be intimidated by any monetary inhibition.
And what is that fee?
I think I can clarify. Right now, the staff is recommending 50% of the fee for outside of the Coastal Commission jurisdiction, whereas if it's inside the Coastal Commission jurisdiction, it's completely waived. And I think Councilmember Rarbach would like the outside commission appeal fee waived as well.
What is that fee?
Oh, the amount? It would be $210. We do not have that information as part of the fee study.
Vice Mayor Penrose?
Yeah, you didn't say anything in here about fees for affordable housing building.
Those are development fees.
They come under a different,
Excuse me, yes, those are a different type of fee. Those are not user or regulatory fees. These are
Okay.
really fees for approving, regulating, so forth. Affordable housing would be more of an impact fee or a linkage fee.
thank you.
So if there are no further questions right now, I'd like to move on and briefly discuss parks and recreation fees. If you look at attachment 4 in the staff report for this session, we'd like to stress that it was not included in this fee study due to the timing, since we're just taking over the Parks and Rec services, and we started this study over a year ago. So we weren't able to get this as part of the scope. And so the fees that we did receive were derived based on combination of what the Boys and Girls Club was already charging for certain services and other fees that were previously approved by the council in the past. And what we would propose with these fees is that they be included in this master fee schedule. However, after the whole system has been operating for about 6 months, 6 to 12 months, we would like to revisit it and perhaps do a standalone fee study for just the Parks and Recs department. And finally, in summary, we went through this fee study to really comprehensively determine what these costs were. The staff does recommend 100% cost recovery with the few exceptions that we had mentioned. The recommendations will result in estimated fee revenue of over $436,000, and because of what these fee studies involve, we certainly don't advocate doing it on a yearly or even a bi-yearly basis, but we do propose that we look at this again in about 5 to 7 years after these fees have run its course. And we'd love to take questions from you.
So I think it would be good to point out that if we adopt the fee structure tonight, then it doesn't become effective for 60 days. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, that's my understanding. There's a public hearing process, sorry.
So the revenue for the first year would be less than that amount. It would be approximately $390,000 instead of the $460 that he mentioned. Okay. So are there any further questions? This is a public hearing, and I'll need to open the public hearing and take any comment from the public. But you can either ask questions now or wait until I open and close the public hearing. Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing. I have no requests from the public to speak. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address this issue? Hearing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the council for questions or comments. Councilmember Ozen.
So I'm looking at attachment 4, which is the City of Half Moon Bay Parks and Recreation Users Fee Schedule. I just have one question towards the bottom. It says no charge for rooms for senior coastsiders when rooms are available. What is a senior coastsider? Is that just a senior on the coastside, or is that a definitive thing?
Adam, I just want to point out that this is actually going to come back to us. We're not going to be deciding on the Parks and Recreation fees this evening.
Yes.
And so just in aid of moving this along, as we have another closed session, than a regular meeting, could we defer questions on Parks and Rec for the time being? Okay. Do you have a follow-up question you'd like to ask? Anyone else?
Are we going to vote about the elimination of the appeal fee for the outside the coastal zone? Okay. I'm going to move that we eliminate that fee.
I'll second.
Do either of you like to discuss? I'm going to say, I'm going to put out some information I think that might help us. We've been talking strategically about doing more development downtown, east of Highway 1, and potentially processing many more permits for duplexes, triplexes, potentially live-work, commercial development. It seems to me that the volume could increase, maybe not right away, but I would like to recommend that we recover some of our cost on this fee. Right now, they've been reduced to 50%, which seems reasonable to me, given that there is time and materials involved. I'd like to just throw that out there. Happy to be rebutted. Councilmember Kowalczyk?
So I'm in favor of them being reduced. I look at it from another side as well. Want to consider that if the fees are zero. Now I understand in the appeal zone it makes sense for them to be zero because if it's zero, that has to come to us and then it goes to coastal. There's a routing. There's a required legal routing, which all makes sense. And out of the appeal zone, I think it's important for there to be a recovery of some of our costs, and should be some modest hurdle that just for lack of a indelicate way, it keeps the riffraff away, so that if there's an appeal, we certainly want to hear it, and if we have a reduced fee, we're making that approachable and accessible. But if we make it zero, I think we're also inviting a lot more than may be necessary. So I think reducing it is fair. And then the reasons Debbie is citing, the mayor is citing, are also important. So I'm comfortable keeping them reduced at 50%.
There's a considerable hurdle in just writing the appeal and getting your act together to do that. So I'm not convinced that you're going to get frivolous appeals, and I want to encourage citizens to know that they have the right to appeal. And as a public policy measure, I would advocate eliminating that fee.
Councilmember Eisen, do you have a stand on this issue?
I mean, I like both perspectives, really. I mean, so I don't really, but I'll give you my opinion is, look, every time somebody comes in and challenges something, has a request for paperwork, it's time and energy. And from my standpoint, that we have staff that has to deal with that, we should be able to recover at least some fee for it. I do like the perspective of people being able to challenge openly and easily, and it is a lot of work on their behalf too, so I get that perspective as well. But I am in favor of collecting at least some money for this.
I just want to go back to the idea that it really is $210, $205. So I don't see that as a huge hurdle in this community. But I will call the question on this motion. We have a motion and a second to eliminate the appeal fee for areas outside of the Coastal Commission appeal zone. Could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Eisen?
Nay.
Councilmember Kowalczyk?
No.
Councilmember Rohrbach?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Penrose?
I'm going to vote no, despite my seconding the motion, having heard the arguments in favor of it.
Mayor Reddick?
No.
Motion fails.
So I want to bring us back to, if there are no, sorry? If there are no additional questions from council members, so the motion is to, the recommended motion from staff is to adopt the attached resolution authorizing adjustments to the City of Half Moon Bay Cost of Services Schedule, user fees for fiscal year 2017-18, as proposed in attachment 1. And the second part of that motion would be to adopt a policy guideline for future annual cost of services increase based on the San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose urban wage earners and clerical workers CPI.
I move staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Could I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Eisen?
Yes.
Councilmember Kowalczyk?
Yes.
Councilmember Rohrbach?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Penrose?
Yes.
Mayor Reddick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
So that motion carries unanimously. I want to thank staff and our consultant for a lot of very hard work and a very thorough presentation. Thank you. All right. So we are going to have to adjourn to another closed session, and we will be back here at 7 p.m. for the regular meeting.